The cold air cut like glass. Soldiers stood silently beside their vehicles, checking gear one last time. Engines rumbled in the distance, mixing with the sound of artillery far beyond the horizon. To them, it looked like just another battle, another push, another mission, another place on the map that few had ever heard of. But history would remember this day differently. For months, one side had been winning again and again. Entire regions fell quickly, and many believed the war's outcome was already decided. Commanders spoke with confidence. Just one more offensive, they said. But the battlefield waiting ahead was unlike anything they had faced before. The terrain was unforgiving. Mud, broken roads, ruined villages. Supply trucks struggled to move. Communication failed at the worst moments, and the defenders were ready. When the first shots rang out, the attack slowed almost immediately. Machine gun fire pinned entire units in place. Smoke filled the air. Orders became confusion. Officers shouted over exploding shells trying to keep formations together. Yet something unexpected happened. Instead of collapsing, the defenders held their ground. Hour after hour, day after day, and for the first time in a long while, the attacking army stopped moving forward. Back at headquarters, generals stared at maps in silence, because they understood something terrifying. If this battle was not won quickly, everything could change, and the war might take a very different direction.
Subscribe to the channel and don't miss new war documentaries.
The offensive began before sunrise. Engines moved through thick fog while officers checked their watches again and again. Everything had been planned perfectly. Timing, direction, coordination. On paper, victory looked guaranteed. But the battlefield had its own rules. The first wave moved forward confidently. Then radio silence struck. Messages stopped coming. Units that were supposed to advance together suddenly found themselves alone. Roads turned into deep mud, slowing vehicles until some stopped completely. Artillery support fell behind schedule, and the defenders noticed. Hidden positions opened fire from unexpected angles. Machine guns cut through advancing lines. Smoke filled the air so thickly that soldiers could barely see 10 meters ahead. Commanders shouted new orders, trying to adjust. But every adjustment came too late. What should have been a fast breakthrough became a slow, exhausting struggle. Hours passed. Instead of pushing forward, troops dug in, trying to survive. Back at command headquarters, maps covered the tables. Red and blue lines were moved again and again, trying to make sense of reports coming in. Losses were growing. Momentum was fading. And the most dangerous thing of all started happening. The defenders were gaining confidence. They began small counterattacks. Fast, precise, impossible to predict. Every attempt to regroup met fresh resistance. The battlefield turned into chaos. Soldiers who expected quick victory now fought just to hold ground. One officer later wrote, "That was the moment we realized this wasn't just another battle. It was becoming a turning point." Night came, but the fighting didn't stop. Flares lit the sky in brief flashes of white. Medics worked without rest. Engineers rebuilt defensive lines under fire. Supply trucks struggled through darkness, sometimes never arriving. And somewhere behind the front lines, generals began asking a question none of them wanted to say out loud. What if we were wrong? Because if this battle was lost, the entire war could change direction.
Subscribe to the channel and don't miss new war documentaries.
By the third day, nobody believed this would be quick anymore. The battlefield had turned into a world of smoke, shattered trees, and exhausted faces. Vehicles stood burned out along the roads. Supplies arrived late, if they arrived at all. Every side was running low on strength, but one side was running low on time. Commanders pushed their troops forward again, hoping one final effort would break the defensive line. Orders came fast, voices sharp with urgency. "Push through! Hold nothing back!" The attack began with overwhelming fire. Artillery thundered across the horizon. The ground shook. For a moment, it looked like the line might finally collapse. Then, Silence on the radios again. Units that moved too far forward found themselves isolated. Tanks became trapped in mud and debris. Infantry struggled to keep up under constant fire. The defenders had learned. Instead of meeting Alcua directly, they pulled back slightly, then struck the flanks. Small groups appeared where they shouldn't have been. Supply routes were cut. Communication lines disappeared one by one. Confusion spread faster than bullets. Officers who had promised victory now focused on simply preventing disaster. Some soldiers later said the battlefield felt different that day, like the war itself had shifted, because for the first time the attacking army began to hesitate. That hesitation was everything. Across the front, defenders sensed it. They pushed forward carefully at first, then harder. Counterattacks grew larger. Positions once considered lost were retaken. Morale, once broken, began rising again. The air changed. Soldiers who had been fighting just to survive now believed they could actually win. Night fell, but the sky glowed orange from fires burning across the horizon. Inside temporary command shelters, generals stared at maps in silence. The arrows that once pointed forward were now being erased. Retreat routes were discussed for the first time. One officer quietly said, "If we don't stop this here, the rest of the war will never be the same." And in that moment, everyone understood the truth. This battle was no longer just a fight for ground. It had become the moment the entire momentum of the war changed direction.
Subscribe to the channel and don't miss new war documentaries.
Dawn arrived slowly. Smoke still hung above the battlefield, mixing with the cold morning fog. The sound of distant gunfire echoed, weaker than before, as if the battle itself was running out of breath. For days, both sides had fought without rest. But now, something was different. The army that once pushed forward with confidence was falling back. At first, it happened quietly. Units withdrew a few hundred meters. Positions were abandoned during the night. Vehicles were left behind because there was no fuel left to move them. Then the retreat became impossible to hide. Observers watched long lines of soldiers moving away from the front, tired and silent. The momentum that had driven an entire campaign was gone. On the other side, disbelief spread. Defenders who had expected to be overrun stepped forward cautiously, discovering empty trenches and abandoned equipment. For the first time, they realized they had survived, and more than that, they had won. Commanders who once spoke with uncertainty now gave new orders. Forward positions were secured. Supply lines reopened. Fresh troops arrived with renewed energy. The battlefield that was supposed to end the war quickly had done the opposite. It had changed the balance. Messages rushed across headquarters far from the front lines. Maps were redrawn. Plans rewritten. Leaders who once believed victory was inevitable now understood they faced a much longer, harder war. One veteran later recalled the moment. It wasn't loud. There wasn't one big explosion or one final charge. It was just the feeling that everything had shifted, and there was no going back. As the sun rose fully, soldiers looked across fields still scarred by battle. They didn't know it yet, but historians would later point to this exact moment as the day the war truly turned. From here on, the future would belong to the side that endured, and the world would never be the same again.